We on the podcast, baby.
Club Talk. Jay Brody. Yeah, baby, it's that Club Talk. Yeah, baby, it's that Club Talk. You're now listening to that Club Talk. And now, your host, Jay Brody. 1, 2, 1, 2, ha!
Alright, welcome back to another episode of Cloth Talk Podcast. Before I introduce my guest for today, if you liked last week's episode with the ladies of the Bitch Kitty Podcast, make sure you go ahead and let me know what you thought about the episode, and let me know what you thought about their podcast as well. And if you're following my podcast, you may have noticed that this whole month I just been sitting down with other podcasters here in Columbus, Ohio. So, and I'm continuing that today. So, shout out. It started off with the Girls That Take Control podcast, and we had the Bitch Kitty Podcast ladies on. Now I got another one on who I'll introduce shortly. But before we do that, make sure if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button right now, that follow, like, share, all that good stuff. Shout out to Tiffy, my girl out there, New York, with the Satin Bonnet podcast, and we're going to start it off with her question of the day, actually. So she wants to know, and my guest today, how rude of me, CEOHaize is in the building from the Awakened Soul podcast out here in Columbus. Thank you, sir, for your gracious time today on the Saturday.
Oh man, anytime.
You could be watching the Buckeyes, but you're here today. Are you a Buckeye fan, though you're not from here originally?
Yeah, I'm a Columbus transplant, but my dad went to Ohio State, so I'm definitely Buckeyes fan.
There we go. Right on. So Tiffy has a question for us for young black men today.
Okay.
So let's see what we can help her out with this question. She wrote, she says, I always wondered why it seems like black men don't have a brotherhood in the same way black women have a sisterhood. Black women are much more connected to one another. I could be wrong, but I'd like to hear you guys' take on this. What do you think?
That's a deep question.
It is.
I think that because men are naturally competitive,
okay,
it's hard to find a group of men who can stay together without necessarily getting competitive, if that makes sense. Okay. So we do have our own form of brotherhood, but it's more competitive. Like if me and you are best friends,
right,
we're gonna try to beat each other, whether it's Madden, whether it's 2K, whether it's Spades, no matter what. And it may get it may seem contentious.
Yeah.
But I think we show our brotherhood that way, rather than like women, they get together and they're like, oh, well, this is how you should do your hair, and I use this can too. And we don't have that same type of things to overlap with, I think.
Yeah, I can't show up to like your house and say, yo, that shirt looks good on you, my man.
Exactly.
He's like, yo, what?
Exactly. You can't show up and be like, hey man, your beard looks really hydrated. What are you using?
Yeah.
Like, you feel me? We can't do it like that.
Yeah.
So.
And then even if you do, you got to do it kind of like a slick way, like, yo, what you using on beard, my man? Like, you know, what you use, you gotta like kind of be like, you can't just like walk up like, yo, man, I've been peeping your beard. So
exactly,
what type of products you using? I think you're right though, like that competitive part. Like I think about like when I was in high school, me and my friends, like after school, we would go out and try to get girls' phone numbers.
Yeah,
and it's like competitive, but within that, you develop a brotherhood like that.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah,
it is weird.
And I think that male brotherhood is tested when somebody else tests the brotherhood, if that makes sense. So you may not see it, but me and you are friends, if somebody comes in like, oh, that Cloth Talk podcast is crap. Wait a second. That's my boy. You ain't finna talk about like
exactly.
that. It comes out like that. So I think that we're just not as outwardly expressive as women are.
Yeah.
Now that can be problematic. I'm not saying that it can be, but I just think we show our brotherhood different than they show their sisterhood.
Yeah. We say sick things like that's my boy. That's my boy.
Exactly.
That is. Well, hopefully we answer that for you a little bit, Tiffy. If not, we'll dive deeper. Just let us know in the comments.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about your podcast a little bit because, like I said, I've been searching for Columbus podcast for like the last month or two. And I'm like, I want to reach out to these guys, develop relationships with them, because I'm planning something. What I want to get your idea on when cameras cut off. Okay. It's something I'm planning for Columbus particularly. But yours came across my radar, and I've been familiar with yours for about like the last 2 months. So yours came across my radar, and the title of it caught my eye, like The Awakened Soul. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, check this out. What this is about. So I went to iTunes. I listened to a few episodes. I'm like, I like this. I like this. This is. I like the angle this guy go on. And another thing, a dope thing I think that you do with your podcast, which is cool, the segments that you do with the two other. I forget their names. Who does the?
We have the unpopular opinion from CEOHaize. And she is dope. She always has a hot take. Yeah. And then we have the petty news from my boy Scoop Grady now.
Scoop Grady, his segment. Yeah, it's pretty dope.
Yeah, neither one of them live in Columbus, but
really?
Like Scoop, he has a comedy podcast, and he's one of the funniest people I know. The fact that his podcast hasn't blown up bigger, I don't get, because literally he's like, people are gonna say I'm exaggerating, but if you take Dave Chappelle in his prime, that's what Scoop is, honestly.
Really?
Real talk. Wow. The dude is hilarious, and he puts a lot of thoughts into what he does. But I wanted, because my podcast is deep, so I needed something to break up the deepness with a little levity. Right. And he was the first person I reached out to. Who was like, absolutely. So it was a huge gift.
Nice. So where does he record from? Where is he from?
St. Louis, Missouri.
St. Louis. And Chanel is
Shanice. She's in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Wow, that's dope. So let's start from the beginning. I want to talk about your beginning stages. When did you realize that this is what you wanted to start the podcast? How did you develop that idea? Like, I want to start a podcast.
So I had been podcasting 2 years before I started The Awakened Soul. Okay. It was a wrestling podcast, which I had a lot of fun doing, but it got my feet wet. But I realized that I had a lot to say, and I wanted to do something deeper. So once I had that thought, I sat down one day and I just started recording, and I sent what became the first episode of The Awakened Soul to a lot of my friends and other podcasters at the time. They were like, man, this is amazing. Yeah. And so because I have hot takes, and the title The Awakened Soul, people hear that and they think, oh, stay woke. It has nothing to do with that. Right. Awakening to me means to wake people up, to bring to light stuff that we don't typically talk about. Exactly. So that's where awaken comes from, is that I want to have discussions that people in our culture usually don't have because they just don't have them in public. Mm-hmm. And then the soul part comes from, I feel like when you really connect with people, you're connecting with them on a soulful, spiritual level. So the awakened soul means to awaken and connect. So it has nothing to do with staying woke. It has nothing to do with that whole vibe. It's its own thing. And so once I decided I wanted to do something deeper and have those type of conversations, everything else just came. And the way I incorporate music, people love the music. I always say, if you come for the music, that's fine, but you'll stay for the content. Exactly. And it just all came together.
That's how it started.
Yeah.
No, that's kind of along lines of when I started my podcast. People always ask me, okay, cloth talk. What does that mean? Cloth talk. It's well, we're all cut from a different cloth, and I believe we all can learn stuff from each other. So I sit down with people purposely that's not like me, to grow and to learn and to challenge myself, and to ask stuff that's unpopular. I had a gay guy on here. We just talked about his experience growing up being a gay kid. How that's stuff we wouldn't even talk about publicly. Yeah, like you said, that's one thing that I pride myself on for wanting to be different, because we have so many outlets out there that's talking about all the things that's popular. I mean, y'all can have that. There's so many out there. It's you're not going to get much different opinion on that type of stuff, depending on what source you go to. So I definitely respect your sacrifice. Do you look at it as a sacrifice? Because I looked at it like a sacrifice. Damn, people gonna fuck with this. I ain't talking about the popular shit, the hottest album. I purposely stay away from that shit. I want you to come here to think, to challenge you to think and think differently and open your eyes to a different perspective. Did you look at it like a sacrifice? Shit, they gonna fuck with this or not?
It's definitely a sacrifice. I think a lot of people who listen to podcasts, they really don't realize everything that goes into it. Because if you do it right, it's a lot of time. But it's funny because what you just said it rings kind of to what a tweet that I did the other day, and that is that I truly believe that us as a people, we're so conditioned to just talk about our hair, talk about our clothes, talk about what's going on in TV, specifically black people, because for so long we didn't have a voice in the things that mattered. Right. So over the generations, we got conditioned into that's what we talk about amongst ourselves. We don't talk about the things that are actually going to change. We don't talk about how we need to raise our kids, unfortunately, to be prepared for their interactions with the cops. Like, we don't have those type of conversations because for so long, black people had to just get along the best way they can to survive. I'm not saying anything was wrong with it because that's how we made it to where we are. We had to keep our heads down and survive. But I feel like we all have platforms now. Even yes, we have a podcast, so we have a bigger platform. But people don't realize Facebook and Twitter are platforms.
Of course.
Do you know what Malcolm X and Martin Luther King would have did with Facebook and Twitter? Like, just imagine, like, you saw what they were able to do by word of mouth and video and everything and marching. Imagine if they had a tool where they can get to thousands of people at their fingertips. You feel me? With their phone that you didn't have to do. We don't have to do anything extra. So it's people like me and you who are the flag bearers for stuff like that, who do take it upon ourselves to push those conversations forward. It may not be popular, but the people, even if I always say this, and I don't want to make myself seem like any bigger than what I am, but I could easily get an extra 1,000 listeners if I wanted to be. Oh, nigga, did you hear Lil Wayne? If I wanted to be that, I can get way more listeners quickly. But I feel like the ones that I do have, I touch deeper. Exactly. So it's all worth it to me.
Yeah, I feel that. Like, I can't make that. I just can't. It wouldn't sit right with me if I had to resort to that just to get like numbers or more listeners or more likes or views. Like, to me, that really doesn't matter as much as the content that I want to put out.
100%.
Like, I can't sell out like that. Like, if I know what the shit that I'm saying with someone like yourself or a woman or a man or whoever is going to resonate with someone more than someone just frivolously looking at it like, oh, cool, he talked about, let me see what he said about the new Lil Wayne album. What's his take on it? Well, what are you going to get from that? Like,
exactly.
Like, okay, yeah, you got my opinion on the album. Now what? What's next? Like, I'd rather try to touch you in a way to where you think and go about life differently. Like you said, everybody has this platform to where, you know, you can get lost in it if you don't have a direction and stay grounded with your shit. Or you could sway the other way and be like, you know what? Everybody's talking about that, and I see all the attention they're getting. I want to join that crowd. I want to join the popular crowd. I said, fuck that. So, this rant.
Oh man,
that I felt you 100% on that. Let's. I wish I could like play a clip. I'll probably insert that in the editing process.
Feel free.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take a pause. Boom. Listen to this clip.
Lose 100 listeners, if I lose 1,000 listeners, so fucking be it. But I'm tired of it. We can't do the fluff anymore. It can't be the focus anymore. I'm disgusted and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. I have to raise 2 young black men in this country. And if I'm not doing my part to try to change it, if I'm not doing my part to bring awareness to it, then what they have to deal with, I'm just as much to blame for it, in my opinion, as the fucking crooked cops. And some may say that's an exaggeration, but that's how I feel. I need to prepare those young men to deal with this. I need to give them the tools to deal with it. I need to give them the tools to try to change something.
And now we're back. So you heard the clip. I edited it in there. Where did that come from?
So right before,
it's like right in the episode.
Right before the rant, I was talking about the workhouse in St. Louis, which is a jail that puts people in terrible living conditions, and then I talked about the situation in Florida in which the police chief admitted to framing black men at that. And in talking about that, I immediately, like, in my mind, I went to thinking about my sons, and if my son's freedom got taken away by somebody, then it got found out, and then that person only gets 2 years in jail, and you took 5 years from my son. And so usually when I get into that process in podcast recording, I'll stop the recording, I'll come back and finish it because I was getting emotional.
Okay.
But then I was like, no, I'm just going to let this ride out. And I feel like when and this is me holding myself accountable. Yeah. Everything we just talked about why I started the Awakened Soul, I have always done those things, but I started sprinkling in like movie reviews and just to add some levity. And I think I was not relying, but I allowed that to become more of the focus, where it was supposed to be a transition to get more into the deep stuff. And so in holding myself accountable, I'm like, nah, fuck this. You feel me?
Yeah.
Like, get the fluff out, like get back on track. It's so for my own mindset and my own, just like I said, in holding myself accountable, the Awakened Soul can't have that fluff anymore. So and just all that going through my head and thinking about, when my sons listen back to this, what do I want them to leave? Because as much as I do this for other people to awaken and to have conversations like me and you having, at the end of the day, I want my kids to be able to go back and listen to the Awakened Soul and be like, this is what my dad was about. And so just all that emotion coming over me, that's what you got. And I didn't want to cut it out, because I feel like what I always say with podcasting is that people will come for the content, but what keeps them coming back each week is their connection to you. And if you don't feel connected to me after that rant, then I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, when people, your genuine listeners and people around you, when they heard that, did they hit you up like,
oh man, listen,
like, oh, you good? What type of like reactions and feedback did you get? Like, yo, baby, you need to talk, or like everything good?
when I pushed upload on that, I'm like,
you knew it was going to, I knew it was going to spark a reaction.
I knew I was going to get feedback.
Yeah.
And when I say, so the episode was like 55 minutes. When I say like an hour and 15 minutes after I posted it started, I was like, oh my God. They were like, you good? I'm like, yeah. Then but more overwhelmingly than anything, I got a lot of, you know what, you right. You know what, I didn't think about it that way. You know what? And because I deal with a lot of other podcasters, they were like, you know what? Listen to this episode. You inspired me. Like, listen to this week's episode and tell me what you feel. Yeah. And so I feel like it did what it was supposed to do. And not to say that I did it for a stunt or anything like that, but I wanted to touch people. And the fact that it did that, and I heard feedback from that, and listeners that didn't have podcasts, they're like, look, I've been thinking about that rant all week.
Exactly.
I wanted you to.
Exactly.
So
yeah. Wow. When you like after the rant, like when you turned everything down, like when you were just sitting alone with yourself, like, oh shit, okay. Yeah. Just like felt like a sigh of relief, like, God damn, I had to get that out.
Yeah, it did. I had to sit there I think I sat there literally for about 15 to 20 minutes before I even like uploaded or edited it, and I was just like, that felt great. Yeah. It was therapy.
Yeah.
So
when you said like you to cut the fluff out, and like, was you looking like in your mind, was you looking back at some like your previous episodes where you kind of seen your content or your podcast go in a direction where you felt like you was losing that initial direction that you want to take the podcast in? Was that where some of that was coming from? Like, you know what, I lost a little bit of myself where I want to go with this. Let me bring this shit back on track.
And yeah, and admittedly, yeah, I think that when I started the Awakened Soul, it was always deep, and
right,
and I in the search for how to even it out, because I don't want to just hit people over the head all the time. Like, I want you to get fed off of it, but I can understand that it's, especially since I'm weekly, it's different. It's difficult to come back every week and hear somebody that just makes you think about life every single week. So I was like, you know what? Let me throw in some movie reviews. Let me throw in some of this, some of that. And eventually, like, whereas my episodes are always about an hour and 15. So let's say when I started off, 40 of those minutes were all deep content. And the rest was kind of just, like I said, to add some levity, to give you a break before we picked it back up into the deepness.
Exactly.
I felt like it started becoming 50-50. And then it went from 50-50 to 60-40 the other way. And I'm like, no, you know what?
Yeah.
This is not what I started out for. Yeah. So if I lose 500 listeners off the 2,000 that I have, all right, then it's just not for them, and that's absolutely fine.
That's fine, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll take a quick break. CEOHaize is in the building right here. Cloth Talk Podcast. Real quick before we go to break, where can they find you, connect with you, listen to you, and all that good stuff?
You can find me at CEOHaize on Twitter. That's CEOHaize. And you can find my podcast, The Awakened Soul, on every major podcast platform.
Cool. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about where he get the name Hayes from, because I'm curious. Keep it locked. Don't go nowhere. Cloth Talk Podcast.
Que linda, you like a lean bay. Icy and sweet enough, I need a replay. PD make the party jump with no DJ. No Rockefeller, we don't even need Jay. Mommy and the homie hit me on the three-way. Said they lonely and they only want to see me. Hop in the V and speed on the freeway. Hit the roof, let the breeze blow the tree away. Stairway to heaven, knocking in front of Key's place. She hopped in and we about to meet Renee. They both proper, knockers, petite waist. Fatty banking like the Glock on New Year's Eve. Wait, let me check my Palm Pilot. We now free to play. We now free to fly out the country if need be. She said she love me, yeah, she said she need me. And all I do is treat her special like my queen bee. She give me honey, I give her money, it ain't free. She get what she want from me, cause that's my baby. Maybe I give her the world, I said maybe. I got that feeling, I'm on my shit again. Feeling like Gilligan's Island, chillin'. But I'm not stranded, cause I just landed. And shit falling into place like I planned it. But I just winged it, I freestyled it. I brought a beam, bitch, 100,000. But we gon' hold this, and we can blow that. But shorty, you hold this, I'ma need you to blow on that. All of my boys know, even my girl know. I'm a pro with a fro like Rilo. I'm a cargo ball cap boy, yo. Grooving off the Merlot, me and Porno. Here we go, round and round like a merry-go. Circle the block, pull over and park the cherry bow. That's the land, miss. Here's the plans, miss. Kiss my ass, that's the only way you get a damn kiss. Cause I'm a A-hole, straight off a state road. Back on that goose, spilling juice, I'ma play close. Take off my low lay, and then I lay low. Get at a hotel, a ho hey.
Hey ho.
The prince back. King let him go, and since that he's intense and definitely strapped.
Podcast. CEOHaize is here. Make sure you go ahead and follow the Awakened Soul podcast on your favorite podcast app of choice. You'll definitely love it. Super dope podcast out here in Columbus. Hayes. Most people probably would assume you like to smoke the good stuff. Where did the name Hayes come from?
I am not a
CEO,
smoker.
I mean, it's self-explanatory, but Hayes.
I'm not a smoker at all.
You know